Good noon. It's been a while since I've uploaded, since I've talked to you guys. Checking the last time I've uploaded, it's this year it's going to be 2 years since I've last uploaded. And I personally feel that I owe you guys an explanation. But this is not only an explanation for you, but me addressing my own issues to myself as well. Now, before I continue with what I'm going to explain, I want to say that there are heavy topics within this, so I will put a list of trigger warnings on the actual video itself, so that way nobody's caught off guard with what I talk about. But to mention a few things that may appear, and that is a lot of mental health issues, such as depression, harmful things like abuse, familial abuse, emotionally, physically, along with mentions of suicide or the attempts of suicide. So these are your warnings. I do not want to scare anybody away, but rather to explain as to what happened with me and hopefully give myself some leeway for things that I haven't properly addressed either. Now, the big reason I want to make this video is to explain why I haven't been uploading. There are a few reasons. One is burnout. Now, this burnout is caused by the other reasons, but at the forefront, it is burnout. When I was uploading, I was employed. It was retail back then. Ever since then, I've been through a few jobs, but it was retail. So that in itself can be stressful work. I used to work as it through the overnight, and I used to stock the shelves and receive the shipment. Now that isn't entirely relevant to what I'm going to explain. This is more relevant, and that is family, and unfortunately, abuse that has been long running within it. I grew up not in the best of ways. That was mainly due to unfortunate circumstance. My mother has practically raised me and my siblings by herself. Now, this isn't a slight against my mother, as everyone deserves love, but there have been a few father figures in my life. A lot of what I'm about to talk about comes from the most recent father figure. For the purposes of this, I will call him Solo. Solo and my mother have had history together. For them, it was good history. First loves. But they've been out of contact for a very long time, due to reasons that I won't mention unless it becomes relevant. The point in which I want to discuss is when they came back into contact. Because as they came back into contact, he slowly made his presence known within the family. That Solo and my mother knew each other. That he understands the situation that we found ourselves in because my mother obviously has been talking to him and he's been helping, at least with financial struggles that my mother may have had or have been having. Solo didn't initially live with the rest of the family. He still lived elsewhere. But he was close enough to make a move. When I first met Solo, it was very nice. He took us out to eat. It showed that while I don't look at this as a sign of a good man or any good person in general, now that I say it, he did display that he has wealth, or at least status. That is probably the better way to put it. He has status, at least within casinos. He's rather a bit of a high roller, so much so that he goes on sponsored gambling trips every now and then, but that's not where he would get his money. He used to work in a government position. Now, I'm going to tread very lightly when I talk about this because he obviously it could very easily expose his identity, which I do not want to do, no matter what has been done. But there have been circumstances in which he is going to get more money due to medical and medical retirement and other winnings through legal actions. Solo very quickly moved in with my family. Now, one of the first red flags should have been that he would only do so if he obtained the role of the man of the house. I I put quotations around man of the house because essentially he just wanted to be in charge. Not only in his potential relationship with my mother, but as a father in the house. He wanted to be the person who led everything. Now, I didn't see the red flags in this mainly because of the father figure prior to him, but again, he will only be mentioned if it becomes relevant. Solo presented himself as somebody who I could grow to love. At first, I was wary because, another father figure in your life, especially after bad experience with the prior one, puts up a little bit of caution. But he quickly broke down those walls, presenting himself good mannered, which initially he was. He gave me a confidence in areas where I didn't have it and kind of gave me power, in a sense, within the familial relationship. Power that, in retrospect, I shouldn't have had solely because I don't think I deserved it. The main struggle would become apparent when he wanted to address the issues within the relationship of the family. By all means, I understand that my family wasn't normal. We've all been through a lot and we have our fair share of trauma and scars. But he had the ambition of fixing that, squashing the beef, as he would say, primarily to me. He would try to fix the relationship between my mother and my siblings and I. I would try to go along with his methods, but very quickly did they prove that it wasn't something that could be done within a within a month or even few. This is something that would take a very long time. However, the type of man he is did not seem to care that rebuilding takes time. Solo was a man. Solo's view on how a man should be is very old school and dated, in that men should lead. Men shouldn't lead with emotion. Now, while inherently that does sound logical, this became very unlogical very quickly, as any moment where I become frustrated, sad, it is immediately dismissed because that's not how a man should act. A quote something he would say very often when I would respond emotionally is, that is feminine shit. We don't do that. Over the course of him trying to fix trauma between me, my mother, this grew to him forcing out information from my mother that I did not know. Now, unfortunately, that means I've learned a lot about my mother and her past, in which I learned that she was also part of the problems that I faced in my life. Something I will mention from the prior father figure in my life is probably the biggest component to me viewing her as part of the problem that perpetuated abuse in my life. When I was in 8th grade, I was very depressed. The man the man she was with, for the sake of the story, let us call him Luke. Luke Luke was a very abusive man. Not physically, very emotionally abusive. And because I was in middle school at the time, I grew very depressed to the point where I did make an attempt on my life. I obviously did not go through with it. And while no harm was inherently done to myself, the, it, that information did manage to reach the school I was going to, that I did make an attempt on my life. So, Child Protective Services was called. And after an investigation, I've come to learn that the agents gave my mother a proposal that yes, they have enough evidence to lock Luke up for abuse towards me and my siblings. However, that would also mean that they would have to arrest my mother for negligence of this abuse. And here's obviously where the part where I believe she perpetuated the abuse that I faced in my life. Those agents proposed a deal that if I moved out, if I stayed with say, at the time it was my grandmother, for a set number of months, then they will drop the case on both of them and leave them alone. Nobody will get arrested. But obviously, if she didn't, they would both go to jail. I don't blame my mother for choosing me to go to my grandmother's. I did go to a mental hospital and therapy after that, but for the next 3 months, I would live with my grandmother. This struck something within me that I didn't know was a dormant issue. It revealed that at a moment where my mother at least had the opportunity to stop abuse, became compliant in it. What could have been an opportunity to get away from the abusive relationship that she had with Luke turned into several years of more abuse because she chose to obviously stay out of jail to be with her kids. again, I don't blame her for choosing that, but I do have an issue that nothing was done after she chose to keep her kids, putting me through more trauma, which leads to Solo. Solo, in taking charge of the house, exposed that information to me, but expected me to forgive my mother. Now, while I understand why she did it, I still did not forgive her. This is where strain grew between me and Solo. He may have recognized it, but he simply didn't care. What he thought was him pushing me to becoming a man, I viewed as him abusing and pushing me over the edge. At the time, I did have a girlfriend. She was the big component to showing me that I was being abused to this very day, or to that very day, rather. She showed me that things that I thought were normal were in fact not normal. Solo and my mother knew about my relationship. Unfortunately for me, it was not a relationship that took place in person. And there could be something said about e-dating or long distance relationships, but that's not what I want to get at right now. The reason I bring up the fact that they knew is because Solo had a particular issue with the method in which it was done. My goal was to move out of that house because Solo proposed the idea that I can move. So I started planning to move out with my then girlfriend. At the job I was working at, I made decent money. However, this is also where Solo would rely on me for money for, say, transportation, the bus. He still had rehab from prior medical issues that he had to attend. And he did not have a car, so he took the bus. And I was made to pay for that. At first, I had no issue. It was okay, whatever the case may be. I can help him travel from A to B because not only do I have the money to do so, but because I at the time wanted to help him. This became a pattern of expecting me to pay for things because of the family. Now, while I will get into later how badly this grew into how bad the issue grew into something else, I would first address how he took charge of the house. He gave everyone responsibilities, obviously, that if I were to continue living in the house, I would also do whatever chores he assigns me. Okay, reasonable enough, obviously. It is when that I fail in completing those tasks that tension grew. Now, while I am not officially diagnosed with ADHD, I can pretty confidently say that I have ADHD. You can live your life only so long without kind of just knowing you have something that is preventing you from doing things like a normal person would. So when Solo confronts me as to why I'm not meeting his expectations, especially as a man, I explain that, you know, either I forgot, which I get can be seen as an excuse, but the idea that I perhaps have ADHD, making simple task be a lot more strenuous than something a task could be for a normal person. Another, this is where the other red flag steps in, where he dismissed the possibility of a life altering mental disorder. Not only dismissing that I possibly had it, but also making a comparison to someone in his family who supposedly had ADHD and they graduated college. Now, he wouldn't explain further than that. Maybe that he would help with that familial member's homework or whatever the case may be, but he never got into the nitty gritty as to what that person did to graduate high school with ADHD or to graduate college with ADHD, excuse me. Only to use it as an example as to why this shouldn't be a burden for me and it should be something I should look towards overcoming. Now, we've had those conversations in front of my mother because he believed that she should have a say in those conversations, which I never had a problem with. What I did have a problem with was my mother essentially saying I made up the idea that I have ADHD when I know that in the past she has discussed with me that it is possible that I have ADHD because of diagnoses I've received when I was a lot younger. But when I came to solo with the idea, or rather the speculation that I have ADHD, she immediately dismissed it as this is coming out of nowhere. And this is kind of where I started to see the disconnect between me and my mother because of him. She gave him control of the relationship and the family. So as she started to agree with him more, that turned into a lot of slights against me. I know she cares for me and loves me, but when brought to it, she said it herself during a family discussion that was very emotional that if it comes to it, she will choose Solo over her own children. She does not want to lose him again, so she would choose him over the children. That would mean whatever he proposes, she will follow, simply to just prevent him from leaving. I do apologize if this all does come scatterbrained or not at all like a cohesive story, as I didn't write a script for this. I'm freeballing it off my mind and off of how I remember things. If I wrote a script for this, I wouldn't have been making this video, I'll be honest. But continuing on. The discovery that she will do anything to keep Solo in her life, and that she was also a perpetuator of my abuse simply by not doing anything after making the decision to keep her kids, grew a little bit of tension between me and my mother, and between me and Solo, because, as discussed before, things started conveniently looking bad to me, or looking bad toward my own behaviors simply because she gave up the control and he is analyzing the relationship of the family. Back to my girlfriend at the time. She had planned to visit me for the first time. She had to travel from a different state to be here. So the day comes. Solo, I tell Solo that she's on her way to here, and he congratulates me, still holding that personality of being the man, being the one who is doing the good here. But the boundary is made clear that she is not allowed into the house, nor is she staying. I agree, simply because I would rather not be in that house at that time. This is at this point in the story, this is where I grew a slight fondness of being more outside of the house rather than inside. The week comes where my girlfriend stays. She stayed in a hotel and I ended up staying with her for that week. Something to preface: before she made the journey over, I had a lot of money saved, about $3,000, a little more than that. When that week was over, I barely had 1,000. Not to any fault of her, it is my own fault for wanting to spend that money that I was personally saving. It was an irresponsible decision at the time, but I don't necessarily regret it because I got to have fun with my girlfriend. Solo didn't see it that way, however, but there's a key factor that I haven't addressed before I get to that part, and that is my grandmother. While my girlfriend was over, we were looking at apartments, still keeping track to wanting to move out of the house. We managed to land on a few apartments. We applied, and I asked my grandmother to be a reference for one of the apartments, as I have asked Solo to be a reference for one, and he said no. So I respected that and went to my grandmother. Now, Solo has described his experience with my grandmother, and it has been anything but good. So even with the knowledge of what she has done to him, and personally what she has done to my mother, I still went to her. That was arguably the biggest mistake of my life. Because from there, then I told my grandmother that I had a girlfriend. And once she discovered also the long distance relation or long distance aspect of the relationship, that is where things started to fall apart. As she came after not only me, or she came after not only Solo, but she came after me in the sense of degrading my girlfriend at the time and degrading me for thinking that it was okay, quote unquote, to have a long distance relationship. I will not repeat any of the words she has said because they are that hurtful. And quite frankly, I don't want to think about that again. My grandmother then would make every attempt to get me to move in with her and to break up with my girlfriend at the time. So much so that she even went as far as to say that if I live with her, that she could get me women to have sex with, because she thought that that's all I was getting out of the relationship with the woman that I loved at the time. More information later came out that she was willing to hire prostitutes to give me, to quote, satiate my need for sex instead of being in a relationship that is long distance. But also in an effort to get me out of that relationship, she went to Solo. Now, this is also where Solo discovers that I blew through a lot of my money during that week she was here. And he did not like that, not one bit. And it's not as if I was completely broke because the job I had at the time paid me really well. And unfortunately for me, I picked up overtime to keep adding to my savings. This will become important later. Solo makes it a point to address that it wasn't a good idea for me to do that, which I agree. It wasn't a good idea for me to spend that money, but I did have fun. I did enjoy my time with that woman. But this is where the earlier part of the expectation to pay comes into play. Because after the discovery of this, he implemented a rule that that not only is my money being monitored by my mother, every paycheck I have to tell her how much I made, and then pulls out, she tells me what I owe her based on my own phone bill and car insurance. Whatever, fine with that. However, he implemented that if he catches me sending money to my at the time girlfriend, who I'll be honest was struggling a little bit financially, he would take money from me and not forcibly take it, as in he would make me give it to him to give back to the family, quote unquote. While I have managed to hide the fact that I still send money, or still sent money rather, to her, the money didn't stop coming out of my account for him. He promised he'd pay me back. However, even to this day, he hasn't. There are two things that really sent me over when it came to the money. One was an emergency, quote unquote emergency. I need to send about $400 or $500 to him to help my mother out, do this thing, yada 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 yada. He said he would pay me back. He never did, even months after it happened. The second thing happened quite later on. By this time, I had broken up with my girlfriend because, quite frankly, I couldn't handle the stress and abuse that I was taking from my parents, because it had also creeped into degrading and outright abusing my girlfriend too, emotionally. So, for her sake and mine, I called it off. The second incident with money that tipped me over the edge was when our washer and dryer, or well, not our washer and dryer, only our washer had officially broken down. Now, as a punishment for, I don't even remember what it was for, but it was something that he didn't like. I was told to hand over $1,000. Oh, no, no, I remember now. He had requested more money from me, and I had stated that the money he had requested would be all that I had from my paycheck that I've gotten, and that if he were to ask for more, it would be coming out of my savings. He did not like that I said that. He told me that it was not my place to question what I do with the money that I give him, nor should I have even questioned why he was asking for more money. Essentially, the classic, why are you talking back kind of thing. But that's what sparked him to volunteer me to hand over $1,000 to help repair the washer. The day the washer and dryer came, he kind of, it was in what I felt as mocking. He said that I should be proud that I contributed to helping get new stuff like a washer and dryer Because while frankly, yes, we did need new ones, and I would have happily given money to do exactly what had happened, repair or rather get new appliances. It was the fact that I didn't have a choice that made me not only upset but also furthered my, there's no real way to say other than hate towards him. Long after I broken up with my girlfriend, he would make passing comments as to, now while I did break up with my girlfriend, I never told Solo or my mother, as telling them would essentially be a social suicide. They would have, I know they would have gone on a why they were right raid and would have never let me go with that. However, under the illusion that I still was in that relationship, Solo would make passing comments as to anything, saying that she changed who I was, that she isn't good for me, and that while he's not telling me what to do, he would still make degrading comments about the relationship, or, well, the illusion of what that relationship. The point of abuse that became physical is not as physical as you would think, because while I was threatened with a foldable mini table, I don't even remember the cause of why he threatened to hit me with it, but it was stupid, to say the least. Something that would quote unquote undermine his authority, I'm sure. But one big point was me, he questioned the relationship that I had and tried to convince me that it wasn't good for me. But I stood my ground. And even though this was a little bit before I did end up breaking up with her, I still felt as if she has shown me more good things than he has done. So, in an effort to show me how wrong I was, he made me get a bucket and fill it with cold water. And he explained what he was going to do when he received an answer he didn't like. So he explained that if he did receive an answer he didn't like, he would pour the cold water over my head. And as an example, he did it. Full bucket of water over my head. He went to go refill it. I don't remember the conversation, but I do know he doused me in full cold buckets of water at least 2 more times. First time, unexpected, sure. He received an answer he didn't like. I was answering honestly. The second and final time, he asked if she was good for me or something along those lines. And I say, I believe she is. And I looked him in the eyes when I said that. And as I was looking him in the eyes, saying that, he poured the water over my head that final time, because that is where the conversation ended. And that is where I learned that honesty is not what he wants. It is compliance that he wanted. His way or the highway. And I was very approaching the highway with how far I was teetering. Another instance of physical abuse, or at least the provocation of physical abuse, is one day I forgot to take out the trash. You would think a simple task as that, failing to do that, wouldn't cause a strong reaction. However, the next day, after failing to take out that trash, he brings me and my brother outside because he had done something that he didn't like that day either. he goes on whatever the case may be with my brother and quote unquote puts him in his place, getting in his face, yelling, or not necessarily yelling, but getting very stern. Essentially, more of the no talking back stuff. That if he talks back, then it will get physical. With me, however, he opens his issue with me by pushing me and provoking me to hit him because he knows I'm angry with him. That much I knew. But he wanted a reason for him to put hands on me even more than he already has. He wanted me to hit him, even though he has told me again and again that if he gets in a fight like that, experience from when he was in combat would more than likely kick in, and it would not be a fight that I would win. That day, he made us do intense exercising, and while I did enjoy the exercise, I did not enjoy the intention behind it. The intention behind the exercise was a punishment, not a betterment. All this to describe that the relationship I had with Solo was not good. I talked and vented with friends about it, about everything that I've been through, and they sympathized and even offered help where they could. That is important as into later on one day in one of my 16-hour shifts. At this point, I've been working at that job for 6 months and have been working overtime for those 6 months. I was on an overnight shift in the middle of a 16-hour shift, and I had thoughts that I never thought I would think of again, not since middle school. The job I worked at was caring for individuals with disabilities, both intellectual and developmental. So I had to take care of them. And this was the one moment where didn't have to be intensely helping out. And that's when they were sleeping and everything was quiet. It was just me. While the house itself had no restriction on sharp objects, there was a very specific knife, kitchen knife, that was hid specifically so that way one of the individuals didn't take it to use it on something that could potentially hurt themselves. That night, I played a little too close with it. Nothing happened, but I knew something was going to happen if I kept it in my grasp. So I called a friend. And then I kind of broke down. I've had enough. The emotional abuse, financial, and at that point, physical abuse I've been facing from Solo was driving me to a point that I knew I wasn't going to return if I continued. All my money that was being saved up kept going into the pockets of my parents. In the state I used to live in, not only did I not meet the income requirements, but I had nowhere near enough money to even bother getting in. So I was at the end of my ropes, destined to continue living a life where I'm being abused in several ways and have no money to escape. That call with my friend and their partner changed my life because they offered to help me get out. And I took that offer. They gave me the money to rent a U-Haul to move. I would have loved to save a bit more money, but the preservation of myself was more important than the convenience I would have later on if I did stay. It was a nerve wracking day. I didn't sleep that day either. I immediately went from my 16-hour overnight shift to getting ready to move. I bought boxes. I packed everything. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I bought the boxes and set a time to pick up the U-Haul. I made it home and told my brother that I'm moving and the reasons why. He had less of a bad experience with solo than I did, but that is primarily because I was the eldest, or I am the eldest sibling. Therefore, I automatically had more weight and responsibility than the others, so he came after me more often. When I returned with the U-Haul after picking it up, Solo congratulated me, assuming that he was the reason that I was moving. And while he wasn't wrong, it was not under the correct pretenses as to why I was moving. He thought his teachings drove me to moving, that I managed to pick up what he was setting before me and set off to do great things, when it was the opposite, that I despised him and his way of teaching, in quotations, was driving me to the brink of suicide. There are views he had of women as well that drove me to the point of disliking him, but I won't get into that, as it is just falls under more of the degrading part of his comments while I was in a relationship. And he was still under the illusion that I was in a relationship when I was moving. So he assumed that I was heading down to the state my at the time girlfriend lived. So he gave me tips, tricks on how to get there efficiently without issue. Obviously, that never happened. I ended up moving in with those friends that helped me get the U-Haul, that helped me escape. All that to say is that I'm away from that now. I have been for a little bit. This year will mark 1 year. Sometime in June, it will be 1 year since I moved out. I still hold on to that pain and struggle with it as much as I may realize it or not. I don't necessarily have an excuse as to why I haven't uploaded ever since I moved out, but it's the understanding, at least to me, and through the teachings of my friends, that it is not my fault that I have this pain. And now that it seems obvious to say, it is something that I have to acknowledge, because there are parts that, even though in my conscience I don't blame myself, in my subconscious I do. And I need to fall in love with content creating again. That is the bottom line, is that I lost the love for it because I thought, or rather, it was implemented in my brain by Solo that this avenue wasn't going to do anything. I wasn't going to achieve like I could in a stable job. You know, the very neurotypical and old school way of thinking, just getting a stable job and growing through there, slaving away. There's a lot that I've grown up with that I need to deconstruct for myself. But there are also things I need to rebuild. Like I've said, my love for content creation. I started my channel off of the love of making people happy, of doing whatever because I chose to do it. Now, it was Bakugan at the time, but maybe it can be something different now. Don't get me wrong, I still love Bakugan, but I also want to try to branch outward. I do apologize once more for all this being scatterbrained and stuff. Again, no script, just my own thoughts and talking mainly to myself, but I also wanted to talk to you guys. I miss making videos. I miss being creative and being as funny as I think I could be. But I've been bashing my head against the wall trying to start again. And I think it's because in that burnout, I blocked out my love for doing content creation. So bear with me, please, as I try again. I don't know when the next upload will be, but I want to try and work on uploading something that I can enjoy and say I am proud that I made it. There are various other things that came with the consistency uploading that I used to do, and that is that I felt uncreative and just wanted to produce something to get it out, to put it out on the field so that way you guys can consume it. I don't like thinking like that. I just want to make something and have people watch it so that way if they experience what I have or are experiencing something that is bringing them down, that they can at least, for however long a video may be, just stop thinking about that and smile, laugh. The harshities of the world can just go away for those few minutes. I want to bring happiness to people. And while before it was because I lacked that happiness in my life, it is now because I want not only happiness for myself, but again, happiness for others. I don't have any other comments to make, only that I want you guys to know that I am trying. I'm trying to get back into the flow of things. But the start of that will have to be that I have to relearn my love for content creation. And that might take a while. So I apologize for that. And I apologize for my absence. I think it was only fair that you all know why I've been gone and where I am. I'm safe now. A lot happier than I was before, but I still have scars. Those will take time to get over. So hopefully I can properly start my content creation journey back up, learning to get over these things, learning to deal with them, and learning to love making again. So, with everything being said and laid out, I bid you all a good noon, and I hope to be back very soon. Thank you for even bothering to look at these videos. I do this all for you.